Okay, as soon as I saw the title, I'm like, Nanites? That's some Borg shit right there. Turns out it wasn't Borg shit, it was gay shit, which, kind of the same thing. Hello, interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, this episode 3, titled The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel. And as per usual, I will stay spoiler-free up front, and we will get into spoilers in the back half, but staying more general up front, I have to say, I freaking adored this episode. And I know I say that with every single episode, but I really, really loved this one, and I think I especially loved it because of how smart I think it actually was. There's kind of a lot going on in this episode in both sides of its stories that I think are deeper than the surface level would make you think. On the one hand, we have a storyline that I think is directly addressing some criticisms that I know have been leveled against the show, specifically in its handling of queerness, and even more specifically in its handling of Jennifer and Mariner's relationship from way back in Season 3. I'll get into it more in the spoiler section, but there was a lot of criticism specifically from the queer community around how the show handled that. Criticisms that even Mike McMahon, the creator of Lower Decks himself, admitted to in an interview that I did with him, that he realized he made a mistake in how he handled it. That I think this episode is going directly to addressing, and I think it does so in a really kind of smart way that doesn't overtly break into like a metatextual addressing of the issue, like sort of like beating you on the head with it, but still allowing the show to address it while giving both Mariner and Jennifer agency in that. Like the nuances of how this episode handled that criticism and both their relationship in general, as well as just their character arcs, I think was really, really smartly done. We'll get into it more in the nuances, but I really enjoyed it. The setting of this episode too was really, really great. We have a fun kind of cruise, like space cruise ship that reminded me both of I think Season 1 episode 2 or 3 of Lower Decks, where we had that one planet with the multiple different like cultural zones that you could go into, as well as in Strange New Worlds, we have that one star base that they keep coming back to, especially in Season 1, which has the different like biome domes on it that this kind of is reminiscent of. So the setting here was really kind of fun, like a vacation place with different biomes, and just the like little offhanded jokes that we get throughout the episode about that, like an artificial sun that knows when you're tanned, is really, really great. So yeah, just kind of like a ricin sort of space hotel sort of thing, which again kind of avoids the problematic usage of Risa. So great there. And then the third element of this is the storyline with Boimler, which I think just really smartly not only progresses Boimler's arc, but also, and we'll get into this again in spoilers, has a really kind of interesting systemic critique of America and also its relationship to Starfleet. I think it's actually very subtle, but I think very intentional, given some of the inspirations that it is directly pulling from for that storyline that I think at first glance you wouldn't think would actually be that deep, but I think really does have something deeper going on with it. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that. This episode overall, just a lot of fun, really great for characters. I think a very smart episode, both in terms of its own addressing metatextually its own criticisms of the show, as well as some smart, generalized political stuff that I really love, all through a wonderful Lower Decks comedic lens. So let us get into spoilers to talk about all of that. I am very excited, but if you have not seen the episode yet, you can jump ship here and go watch it. Why are you watching me if you haven't seen it? What are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Go watch Lower Decks. Come on. All right, I'm going to kind of go through this scene by scene as I usually do, but there's a lot to talk about this episode, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker than I normally do, otherwise we'll be here for forever, and I really want to discuss some of this. So first off, we have the Cosmic Duchess, the ship that I was talking about in my spoiler-free section. Love the name of that ship, and I love the mission that they're on, which is to go and catch this nanite cluster, or the Glumpus, as Rutherford would later call it, which is absolutely adorable. And I love the little nuances as they go on the mission, like Tendi being just excited to be back. I love T'Lyn saying, as much as there's an increase in cheering, your presence is comforting. And I'm like, oh man, that is almost as much as a hug from a Vulcan. And we get some really cute T'Lyn stuff this episode that I really adored. So just love that setup. But then we have Jennifer coming along with the crew on the mission, and Jennifer's still thinking that Mariner is her girlfriend, which I loved. So let's kind of address this right up front, and I'll kind of go through this storyline a little bit, and I'll go back and mention some specifics about the storyline as I go. But for those of you who don't know, one of the major criticisms that was leveled at Jennifer and Mariner's relationship in season 3 is that at the end of season 3, Jennifer, in the penultimate episode, sort of turns her back on Mariner, thinking that Mariner had sort of sold out the crew when she actually hadn't. And then when Mariner comes back to the crew at the end of the season finale, Mariner just sort of walks by Jennifer. And this is something I talked about with Mike McMahon in my interview with him. And he sort of opened up about the fact that he felt he had made a mistake there because it was just Mariner walking by her. And there was no moment where the two kind of had a moment to handle and recognize that they had broken up.
We don't get more minutes for the finale. You know what I mean? And then at the end, I wanted to like end on this happy note, have a Badgie moment. And I wanted Mariner to have to reconcile with her mom and with her friends and with Ransom. And I wanted Talyn to come in. And it's like to fit all of that in and also get this moment with Jennifer felt like a thing to me. Mm-hmm. So when Mariner comes in, like we reworked that moment where she passes Jennifer a couple times. Cause I was like, this is the only moment we get of closure for this storyline with Jennifer. And I need the audience to visually and instantly know how Mariner feels about Jennifer. And Mariner walks right past Jennifer. Jennifer looks up, sees her, looks guilty for a moment, but Mariner keeps moving forward and then immediately is in it with Boimler, with Ramsey, with all of these people who actually care about her.
Yeah.
And like, who do make mistakes. They're not perfect, but like, well, Ramsey's pretty perfect, but like, but Jennifer, like, to me, that was like, oh, by coming back, Jennifer's not a part of the equation for Mariner. She's got bigger fish to fry, and she's got people who actually care about her. But that moment for me, because it took up space that I was like trying to Tetris every single thing in, I think it just blew past. And I think that like, possibly because I'm like a straight white guy that's like, doesn't know how important it is to like, I know intellectually how important it is to have these stories share equal time on screen with stuff that we've always seen with kind of like, heteronormative couples, that like I needed to be a little bit more careful and land that plane a little more like a passenger plane and less like a Navy plane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, in hindsight, I'm not even sure how I would have handled it, but that was my attempt at a rounded story. I know that was a long explanation.
No. And as a result of that, while he thought it was clear that like Mariner just walking by Jennifer was signal enough to sort of say like that relationship's over with, the fact that they didn't have that conversation, that they didn't even have that moment to like really sit with that and like have that emotional beat, even if it would have been just a look or something, was a detriment to their relationship and kind of didn't really give it the weight that it deserved. And so this episode is taking that criticism of how the show handled that breakup and how Mike McMahon sort of thought about it, and actually making it something that was part of Mariner's character choice. And that I think was really, really smart because it fits Mariner really, really well. She is a character, as this episode very clearly shows, who will do anything to avoid a difficult conversation. She doesn't really want to get deep and emotional because she is a character throughout her whole run on the show, has kind of shoved out any emotional introspection. However, she is now at a point in her life where she is better about it, but she's not fully there. And so she's kind of willing to have it, but if she sees a way to get out of it without having to do that emotional introspection or to have that difficult moment, she will take it. And so she does when, she's confronted by the crew saying, you should go talk to her, because she clearly didn't think that you actually broke up. And Mariner does not take that chance because, she realizes Jennifer is transferring off to another ship. And I think just, again, it's an emotional understanding of the character and how she's grown throughout her character arc, and sort of like makes that decision in season 3 fitting character beat for her as someone who does emotional avoidance. But also sort of is addressing that criticism head on and saying like, yeah, these characters should have had that conversation. And what I think is even smarter here too is because we get some initial jokes about like, hey, relationships in Starfleet work differently. Did she get turned into a crystal, as Rutherford said us at one point? Loved that as like a joke of like, oh, it could conceivably happen that he would not think that Mariner would have broken up with her. And I think if it had left it at that, like that would have been funny, but I think would have done a disservice to Jennifer and kind of made her look silly. And what I really, really liked, and I thought was emotionally very, very smart about the episode, is it ultimately is revealed that Jennifer was just messing with with Mariner, and that she was doing this because Mariner never had the talk with her. And I thought that gave Jennifer a good amount of agency in this discussion. She's messing with Mariner and because she wanted that conversation, and she deserved that conversation to a degree for them to break up. But it also, just by her choosing to do that in this episode, again fits Jennifer and showcases exactly why they weren't good for each other. Because as Jennifer says, when they do admit that they were messing with each other, she says, I only saw you for you being bad. That was why I was interested in you. So it never occurred to me that you had been telling the truth. Mariner also throwing back, like, I needed you to have my back as my girlfriend. And it showcases exactly why they wouldn't have worked together long term, and why they worked together at that moment. Because Mariner is someone who was the bad girl, but she wants, I think what her character arc is, she wants to find her place. She wants to grow into being someone who fits in Starfleet, but she has a lot of trauma, as we saw last season, and sort of a rebellious streak that sort of pushes her against that. But it's something that she wants to grow out of. Whereas Jennifer, she liked that rebellious streak in Mariner. So, it's a natural part of relationships sometimes that you grow differently from each other. And so while they were good for each other at the moment, they would have ultimately held each other back for where they wish to grow as people. And that's fine. That's how relationships go. It doesn't mean it was a bad thing, but it does mean that they were growing differently from each other. And I think that this situation shows exactly why they were not good for each other, but why they were good for each other for a moment. Why, as Jennifer says at one moment, why we had fun. We were very chaotic together. Again, it was smartly handled, that allowed both characters to have agency, was very metatextually sort of addressing the criticism that, it should have happened in the first place, but it made it a character beat that justified it a little bit more. And so retroactively, I don't think it makes it, it doesn't make Mike McMahon's or the other writers on the show's mistake good necessarily, but at least allows the show to grapple with it in a smart way. And this is what I love writers to do more, because this is something that we often don't talk about I won't go into this because this is me waxing poetical about writing, but no writer is ever going to get everything perfect. They should work to try to listen to others and try to do that critique work, and have people maybe in the room, in the writer's room, to talk about these issues before it comes up, and actually so these things don't happen within the writing. But the joy of writing, especially ongoing storylines, is you can sort of have that conversation with the audience and build upon each other. I mean, I was using this for another video on my channel, but which, by the way, will probably tell you how much in advance I filmed these videos, because if you saw that video, it would have already been out. But this is a book by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this book itself right here is her addressing, she wrote this book 2 decades after she wrote the other 3 books in the Earthsea series. This is the 4th book in that series, and in this book, it's her trying to deal with the fact that she had written in the first 3 books a wizarding school that only men were allowed to go to. And so this is a book with her sort of talking about what that means within her world that she created, and why she had such that implicit patriarchal mindset when she was writing the first 3 books, that she didn't have even the ability to break down at that point in her life, but did later on. And so this book is addressing that. And I think that this show is doing that. I mean, it speaks to people like, sorry to bring her up, but J.K. Rowling, who sort of doubles down on my work was perfect and great, and everyone tells me it's the most wonderful thing ever, so I'm never going to change, and I because I am perfect and I am great, everyone else must be wrong. It's no, art should be introspective and grow and kind of have this lovely conversation with the audience. And I really loved that, and I really love this. Sorry for me waxing poetically about it, but again, this just goes to sorry, there's now someone beeping outside my house. Okay, there we go. But it just goes to why I love Lower Decks and why I adore this show so much. People just relegate sometimes this show to be oh, it's just the show that makes a lot of Star Trek references. I'm no, this is some of the deepest character writing and thoughtful character writing and thoughtful, I think, just Star Trek writing that I see. And I just really, really love it. And this just goes to that. Exactly. Some other things to note with this storyline, and then I'll jump over to the Boimler one, which I also think has some interestingly smart critiques, even though ones that I kind of wrestle with my own personal politics, but we'll get there. Things in this storyline with Mariner and Jennifer, I love Rutherford taking pictures with his implant. I love Tendy getting excited about scanning people, but I adore most of all T'Lyn loving Krog and loving the vibe tubes, and just the little moments with her just looking at the vibe tubes and being I'm getting like emotionally excited. Like, again, she's just like her Vulcan. She's like fanning out as a Vulcan, and it's just her like, I am somewhat compromised. Like, it's so Vulcan, and it's like a Vulcan fangirl moment. It's adorable. And then when she gets to meet her favorite singer, Krog, he's trying to find his inner chill, so he practices Vulcan meditation and literally vibes with her. I thought that was so wonderful and so Vulcan. Like, again, this show just gets Vulcan culture really well with her character and how she's like how Vulcan emotion works. It's really adorable. And I loved at the end where Tendi got her an autographed picture from Krog, and like Talin's like, oh, this has no scientific purpose, it's useless. But then when Tendi tries to take it away, Talin's like, no, I'll hold on to it. Just absolutely Vulcan adorable. Like, she has an emotional tie to it, and she's not really willing to admit it. I don't know. It's so freaking cute. Oh, also, there was a joke about an underwater dry park at one moment, which I'm like fascinated by. That sounds like a lot of fun. And there was also just a bunch of really great sight gags in this episode, and also like the pardon our nanites joke, as well as the joke about Mariner keeps on counting the sides of the nanite thing to like label it correctly. I just call it a D20, even though I don't know if that's how many sides it actually had. I didn't count, and I don't know what the dodecahedron or whatever word she said was. I'm not a mathematician. Don't get geometry at me. But I love that as a Starfleet style joke of just everyone being a nerd in that way. But let us jump over to the Boimler storyline, which again, I think has some really smart things to say as well. So we have Boimler going on a kind of undercover mission with Ransom and Billups. And first off, I love Billups keep on coming up with like a name for himself that's like really wild, and Ransom just not wanting to take it. It's like, you need to do something that people will remember. Love that. But then Boimler being worried about being the canary in the coal mine because Jet sort of says that Ransom puts people in danger, and he lost his hands. I can't even scratch my nose. Which was great. And I love the recurring jokes that Boimler throughout the whole episode being like, I'm not the canary! And Ransom and Billups like very much affirming him in that, but also being like, I have no idea what he's talking about. Again, very Starfleet. Like, we affirm you and your weirdnesses, but also, sure, we love your weirdness. We don't know what's going on, but we affirm you. That's so freaking Starfleet. Love that. Just again, Lower Decks just gets what Starfleet and Star Trek is all about. I love some of the jokes where like Boimler's trying to avoid being the canary in the coal mine. One of my favorite ones is he goes up to the Cretaceans, which are as a Star Trek Enterprise fan, I knew exactly what was about to happen because these are the alien species that appeared in Enterprise. Were always offended at every little thing because their cultures were very different. And obviously Boimler doing the same thing here, where he would eat food in front of them, which they see as more intimate than sex. So I thought that was very fun. Just reminded me of that one episode, A Night in Sick Bay, where Archer had to perform that really weird tree ritual because his dog peed on a sacred tree, which, you know, Archer's kind of a full of himself asshole. Like, these alien species are a bit uptight, or at least have different cultural perspectives, but Archer is a jerk for that episode, very much so, even though his dog did get sick. But again, his fault for bringing the dog.
But if their carelessness has hurt Porthos, or God forbid ends up killing him, they're gonna find out what being offended is all about.
Porthos has no intention of giving up.
Archer's such a himbo captain. We stand him to a degree, but such a himbo. Anyways, the other jokes that I loved is when Boimler's holding on to that guy's back in the ski lift, or skiing down, and he's like, I'm like, please help me down. He's like, you're holding my genitals. Like, why are they on your back? Where else would they be? Love that. And I also love Boimler falling off the cliff. Nearly died at his Boimler scream there. And also when the admiral that they were going after freeze framed Boimler on his scream, and it like echoed for a little bit. Like, that's just some fun auditory humor I love. And again, we love Jack Quaid's Boimler scream. Absolutely freaking perfect. Lovely, and just killed me on every moment there. However, this brings me to kind of what I was alluding to a few times here, which is the end of the episode where Boimler meets the admiral that they're going after. And it's very clear that the episode was aping on Apocalypse Now, the Vietnam War movie that was very anti-Vietnam. I won't go into a deep dive on the critiques, and analysis of Apocalypse Now. There's a lot going on there. But it is interesting to use that imagery for this Admiral character, kind of playing like Kurtz, which also is addressing Heart of Darkness, which is its own complicated piece of work as well. What is interesting too is like even the Admiral himself brings up like this systemic critique of Starfleet. And him being like, oh, they shoved me to the side. I have to work with Gormanganders and such. And this is interesting. And this is kind of where my read on Star Trek sometimes bumps up against what Star Trek has to do, kind of because of what it is and what the storyline is. Because ultimately, you know, Apocalypse Now is very critical of the American war machine and the Vietnam War and things like that. And that imagery is sort of alluding to that sort of systemic critique of Starfleet and how it doesn't let people fit in where they want to fit in and affirm people where they want to be affirmed, and sort of it's not touching upon the imperialist and colonialist stuff with that and militaristic part of that, but it is sort of hitting on those same kind of ideas. It is interesting because, you know, what we do get with Starfleet, and I think this is kind of going to something that Mike McMahon has spoken about in his other things, and what Star Trek generally does is it sort of reaffirms that this is a system that does enable people to be their best selves. And that's what Ransom and Billups do. They sort of say like, oh, we wanted to give you a chance to be brave, and I guess that was ultimately a little bit cruel, but we were here because we recognized you, and like you're prepared to an unhealthy degree, and Bourne was like, oh, you recognized it. So, you know, it's that Star Trek thing where like this is a system that is reaffirming. It is trying to enable people to be their best selves. And I think that that's what Lower Decks, I think, understands best about Star Trek, which is Starfleet and the Federation should be there to affirm people being weird and being their own unique selves. Sometimes other elements of Star Trek, especially modern Star Trek, I'm looking at you, Strange New Worlds, sometimes more place it as people find themselves fitting into Starfleet, like we have a grander purpose in Starfleet that we all slot into, rather than Starfleet's grander purpose being enabling us to seek out like our best selves, seek out each other, seek out new civilizations. It's not that Starfleet's grander mission is what we slot ourselves into. It's that Starfleet's grander mission is about enabling us to discover ourselves and others. It's about finding out what's beyond that next star and also what's within us, as Captain Archer said in one of his final speeches of Star Trek.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
And so, you know, sometimes shows, Star Trek messes that up, I think, especially, again, Strange New Worlds Season 2, I think is particularly the one that I will point at for that, though some other shows do it in various ways at different times. But Lower Decks, I think, always kind of understands this, that Starfleet is about enabling you. And I think that this episode kind of gets at that. And so to pull from Apocalypse Now, again, imperialism, colonialism elements aside, because we could also talk about that within Star Trek as well, that sort of Apocalypse Now touches upon. I think it's more this idea of this sort of relationship to the Federation to sort of American hegemonic status quo. So I think that there's some interesting things we could critique with the use of Apocalypse Now in relation to Starfleet, and maybe some unanalyzed elements of imperialism that this episode is definitely not going for. And I've already overanalyzed this. How many people have already clicked the dislike on this video for my thinking about this? But it's just something interesting. This is, again, why I love Lower Decks. Like, people on the surface, it's just a funny little comedy show, but there's a lot of depth here that I think is really very smart. And I think it's a very interesting conversation that this show kind of enables just by doing stuff like that. I love it. Like I said, I may not even think it's always perfect, but I really do love this, and I love this show for that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, obviously, I love the lazy river jokes and things like that. The episode does end, I will say, on that sort of background ongoing storyline, which is we have this Intrepid class ship from another universe that was like causing the Nanite problem, and then the Admiral sort of getting to help them and not having to deal with the Gormangander stuff, which again, it's a nice fitting ending for all of that. Again, Starfleet finding a place for where people are wanted, not what people want to do, rather than, you know, forcing them to fit a certain spot. However, this is obviously the ongoing storyline, because back in episode 1, we have the rifts between different universes, and we have the same thing here. So clearly they are setting that up for being the ongoing storyline throughout the season. So excited to see that coming up. Also, I will say I liked that this is not the same way that it showed up, because my big criticism of last season was that every single episode kind of opened with the same sort of beat with its ongoing storyline, which is fine. They did some nuanced differences with it, with the different like species, but I found to be a little bit repetitive. So here, bringing it up in a subtler way and also in a different way than it appeared in the first episode, I think was really, really cool. So, love all of that. Excited for where this season is going. I love this episode for very obvious reasons. Did you like my over-intellectualizing a comedy show? I'd love to hear all that down in the comments below. But beyond all of that, my friends, I hope you live long and prosper.